After you play about an hour of Flawed, the Ascension, you begin to see the foundation of a solid Metroidvania. But you can also see why the game is currently in early access. Just last month, I played the demo of the game for the first time during Steam Next Fest, and it was the demo I was the most impressed by, which I talked about in this video. Links in the description. The roughly 2-hour long demo felt very polished and quote-unquote complete. So when the developers gave me a code for the game for its early access release, I was super pumped to try it out. While I could see the continuation of the promise the demo makes, unfortunately a lot of the things that impressed me in the short demo started feeling pretty stale in this longer release. Not to mention, because it's in early access, some lack of polish was easy to encounter, which I didn't encounter in the demo. So I decided to stop playing the game after about 10 hours, not because the game is outright bad, mind you, but because the game succeeded to intrigue me enough that I just felt like I should get back to it when the full 1.0 release happens, so I could enjoy the polished, finalized version of the game properly and not tarnish my experience with its current, understandably flawed state. I would still recommend it to people who are big fans of Metroidvanias like I am, but I do have a few things I must talk about.
What do you want to talk about?
Flawed, the Ascension has a big focus on telling a story, and good news is that for a change it doesn't follow the Souls-style cryptic lore-based storytelling that a lot of contemporary Metroidvanias adopt these days. The main story is told straightforward with easy to understand, fully voiced dialogues, so even for a guy like me who doesn't usually focus on stories in Metroidvanias, I couldn't help getting into it. A similar non-contemporary approach is taken in the game's art style. While most recent Metroidvanias tend to lean towards a dark and gloomy art style primarily inspired by Hollow Knight, Flawed goes the opposite way and adopts a bright, colorful, sort of optimistic looking art style, which is what made it stand out to me at the first glance. The primary USP of the game is a somewhat JRPG-style party gathering mechanic. In your adventure, you meet different characters who join your party and whom you can assign to one of your 3 action slots to invoke them during combat by consuming mana. Each one of these characters offer a unique offensive ability and a passive buff. I recently played Ender Lilies and Ender Magnolia back to back, so this mechanic felt quite familiar to me. While these characters' abilities certainly help during combat, to be honest, I had totally forgotten about them for like 70% of my playthrough, and I was doing just fine. I can see using these abilities would be more necessary as you progress through the game and difficulty ramps up though. For example, in this snake boss fight, these abilities, especially the chef's fire damage ability, helped a lot, and it was almost essential to finish the boss. My issues with the game begin with the controls. The same button would perform a backstep if you're not moving and perform a dash if you're holding the left stick to any direction while pressing the button. These 2 actions are always tied to the same button and it can't be changed. I thought it was a baffling decision. First of all, I don't know, maybe this is a hot take, but so far I have never seen a game where backstep is actually useful. In Bloodborne, for example, if you press circle without moving the left stick, then you perform a backstep, and if you hold the left stick in any direction and press the same button, you roll. If you're locked onto an enemy, then instead of rolling, you dash to avoid their attack. In my multiple playthroughs of Bloodborne, I have never for once performed the backstep in combat or traversal, and I don't know anyone who did. Even the playthroughs I saw on YouTube or footage used in video essays, I don't recall ever seeing anyone actually using backstep. The button is always used for rolling and dashing. Because backstep requires you to not move at all, it just goes against your muscle memory, especially in combat where you're always moving to position yourself strategically so you can both avoid getting hit and strike the enemy. Even just solely to avoid getting hit, a roll or a dash is objectively the better option, especially with the iframe they provide, than a backstep. All this applies to Flawed the Ascension as well. Since you need to not move to perform a backstep, you'd rather find yourself dashing instead in combat scenarios since they're tied to the same button. But where Bloodborne's backstep remains just useless without hindering you in any other way, you can just choose to not use it, in Flawed you need to use backstep to parry the enemy and launch a counterattack. Again, another baffling decision. Since backstep itself is not useful in combat, why not just use a traditional parry system with a dedicated parry button like all the other games with parries? Instead, we have this complicated system where even in the heat of combat, you have to stand still and time a backstep, which by its nature makes your character move away, thus throwing your positioning off, in hope that you timed it correctly, and then you have to press attack to launch the counterattack separately. Considering that you're often fighting multiple enemies together, you'd rarely find an opportunity to stay still and counter an enemy through a backstep without getting hurt by another one. I don't know if it's too late, but I really think this is a fatal flaw and the devs should cancel this backstep system and just incorporate a regular ass parry system. With the snappy combat animation and crunchy sound effects we currently have, I can see a traditional parry system would elevate the combat a lot. Unlike most other games, you can't do more than one attack at a time while in the air. Well, I guess you can do one horizontal and one vertical attack, and that's it. Unlike other games, you can temporarily float in the air and perform a full combo. Because of this, your attacks feel very limited as you mostly have to stay on the ground, so the fun I was having in the short demo quickly became stale and repetitive in this longer version. But then again, in this boss fight for example, I was able to stay in the air and perform 3 attacks. I tried to replicate it with regular enemies, but it didn't work, so I don't know what's happening. Maybe at some point you find an upgrade that allows you to strike more times in the air, but since I didn't get it even after playing 10 hours, I think if such an upgrade does exist, it should be given to the players much earlier, as without it, combat suffers too much. If no such thing exists, then air attack should be properly incorporated from the very beginning. Continuing with the control issues. I'm used to having the RT button for dash in other games, therefore I customize the control scheme to RT for dash and LT for wall run. Maybe because the RT button is deep, the game seems to often register 2 button presses. For example, I'll first jump and then press RT to air dash to a wall and then press and hold LT to hold onto the wall and run upwards by holding the left stick upwards. But a lot of times if I hold the RT button slightly longer before releasing it, the character air dashes off the wall. I can't be sure if it's happening because the game is registering holding the RT button longer as a double press or if it's actually an intended function. Either way, it was very annoying. The most disappointing thing for me in this early access version was the lack of direction as to where you need to go. Yes, it's a Metroidvania, backtracking and wandering around is part of the genre, and I'm definitely not asking the game to hold my hand. But in more expertly designed games of the same type, there are subtle nudges from the game that directs you to explore a certain way that maintains a sense of wandering all the while making you feel like you are progressing. Here, because around the beginning you get to choose either double jump or air dash as an ability upgrade, and that largely dictates which way you can go, you often end up wandering unusually further in the wrong direction, only to have to get back without making any substantial progress in terms of completing the game. Again, getting stuck at a point due to lacking a certain ability is a main part of the Metroidvania experience. But here, these points where you'll realize you lack an ability to go further are buried so deep in a level that after reaching there and then having to just go back drains significant amount of motivation from you. It is well exemplified in this area, where after completing a side quest, you get access to this boat, and after riding this super slow moving boat for almost a whole minute straight, you reach here only to realize you can't go further because you don't have the double jump. In a better designed game, it would have required you to have the double jump before you could reach the boat, so that you could be spared from having to waste time riding the boat only to go back taking the long ride again. This kind of frustrating backtracking prevails all over the levels, and coupled with a lack of direction, it significantly drained my motivation to explore. The idea of giving the player a choice at the beginning whether to get the double jump or the dash seemed like a very interesting concept to me, and I think they should be kept this way. But unfortunately, the levels aren't designed well enough to accommodate the unpredictability that comes with it.
Now, this is not to say that it's bad.
I realize based on what I talked about so far, it might seem like my opinion of the game has dramatically changed from the demo. Well, kind of, but I also don't want to make it seem like I hated the game. I certainly did not. Like I said in the beginning, I can clearly see a very competent Metroidvania here, especially since according to the devs, this is just the first 35% of the full game. I can imagine some drastic improvements by the time the full release happens. But in its current state, there are some weird design decisions in the game as I mentioned, and this video is my attempt at helping the game improve. That is what early access is for, after all. I will be eagerly waiting for the 1.0 release and hopefully revisit the game and make a follow-up video when it happens. I'm really intrigued by the art style and the story premise. I wish the developers good luck.
Live long and prosper.